A young woman in 1897 Boston stared into a mirror at midnight on Halloween. She was looking for her future husband's face. Instead, she saw a skull. 6 weeks later, she was dead. In medieval Scotland, entire villages would eat dinner in complete silence on October 31st, believing that a single word spoken would summon death itself. And across America in the 1800s, teenage girls baked cakes mixed with their own blood, then ate them while walking backward up staircases, convinced this would reveal who they'd marry. Dozens died in the process. These aren't urban legends or ghost stories. These are documented historical events, real people, real deaths, real superstitions that society took so seriously, some towns actually passed laws to prevent them. What you're about to discover are Halloween beliefs so strange, so forgotten, and so psychologically devastating that the modern world has buried them, only to resurrect them as products, apps, and expensive experiences that generate billions every October. Subscribe right now and drop a comment telling us what supernatural mystery you want exposed next, because what we're about to reveal will change how you see Halloween forever. Boston, 1897. Margaret Ashworth sits alone in her bedroom at 11:58 p.m. on Halloween night. The room is black except for a single flickering candle. In her trembling hands, she holds an ornate hand mirror angled to catch her reflection. She's been sitting here for 20 minutes waiting for midnight when Victorian superstition promised she'd see one of two things in the glass: the face of the man she'd marry or a grinning death's head predicting her demise within the year. At precisely midnight, Margaret gasped and dropped the mirror. It shattered. She told her sister she'd seen emptiness with eyes. Margaret refused to eat for the next month and died in early December from what doctors called melancholic wasting. We'd call it a psychosomatic death triggered by absolute terror. This wasn't an isolated incident. Historical medical journals from the Victorian era document a disturbing pattern. Young women performing these mirror ceremonies and subsequently dying from what appeared to be fear-induced physiological collapse. The ritual had strict parameters: total darkness except one candle, absolute solitude, the mirror held at a specific angle. Some versions required eating fruit while staring at your reflection. Others demanded you count backward from 100 while brushing your hair in reverse strokes. Break any rule and you wouldn't just fail to see your future, you'd see something worse. What makes this particularly sinister is how the superstition spread through female social networks. Girls would gather the day after Halloween, whispering about what they'd seen in their mirrors. Those who claimed to see male faces were envied. Those who saw nothing felt cursed to spinsterhood. And those who saw skulls or emptiness became social pariahs, marked for death, often shunned by their own families. This created intense peer pressure for teenage girls to perform an objectively dangerous psychological ritual, knowing that whatever they saw or claimed to see would define their social standing for the next year. The neuroscience behind why this worked is straightforward, but disturbing. Human brains excel at finding faces in random patterns, a survival mechanism called facial pareidolia. In low flickering light, the shadows and highlights on your own face constantly shift. Your brain, primed by expectation and fear, starts constructing faces from these random patterns. If you're hoping to see a husband, your pattern recognition systems will eventually generate a male-looking face. If you're terrified of seeing death, your anxiety will eventually produce something skull-like. Either way, you're not seeing the future. You're seeing your own expectations reflected back through neurological noise, but the experience feels absolutely real and supernatural. Then there's the spiral prophecy, another Victorian obsession that's been almost completely forgotten. The superstition centered on peeling fruit, usually apples or pears, in one continuous spiral on Halloween night. The belief system had two components. Throw the peel over your shoulder, and its landing shape reveals your future spouse's initial. But critically, the peel's length predicted your remaining lifespan. A long, unbroken spiral meant decades ahead. A short peel, or one that snapped during peeling, meant your death was imminent, possibly before the next Halloween. Victorian diaries reveal the anxiety this created. Young people would practice fruit peeling for weeks before October 31st, desperately perfecting their technique because they genuinely believed their longevity depended on knife skills. An 1889 journal entry from a Manchester girl reads, "My spiral broke after 3 rotations. Caroline's reached nearly 2 feet. She will live long and marry well. I have failed at both." The writer died 7 months later from scarlet fever, but her community remembered her short spiral and viewed her death as prophesied rather than tragic medical reality. This superstition served multiple social control functions simultaneously. It kept young women focused obsessively on marriage as their primary life goal. It provided a framework for explaining early deaths in an era of poor medicine and high mortality, and it created a perfectionist anxiety around a completely arbitrary skill, ensuring that most participants would fail and spend the following year in fear. The psychological damage was the point. Fear makes people controllable, and Victorian society needed controllable young women. The scientific reality behind spiral prophecy is pure statistical manipulation and confirmation bias. In an era where life expectancy was around 45 years and disease killed unpredictably, some people who peeled short spirals would inevitably die within the next year, not because of the spiral but because death rates were high across all demographics. But these deaths would be remembered and cited as proof. Meanwhile, the thousands of short spiral peelers who survived would be forgotten, and long spiral peelers who died would be explained away as having broken some other rule or being cursed by different means. The superstition was designed to be unfalsifiable. Modern psychology categorizes these practices as magical thinking rituals with confirmation feedback loops. The ritual provides ambiguous results that can be interpreted multiple ways. The participants' expectations shape their interpretation. Subsequent events are selectively remembered to confirm the prediction, while contradictory evidence is dismissed. It's the same mechanism behind horoscopes, palm readings, and fortune cookies, just with higher stakes and more dramatic presentation. What's genuinely disturbing is how seamlessly these Victorian superstitions have been transformed into 21st century products. Walk into any occult shop or browse online mysticism retailers, and you'll find divination mirrors or scrying glasses sold for $40 or $90. These are literally just darkened mirrors or black glass surfaces, identical to what Victorian women used, now packaged with mystical-sounding descriptions about revealing hidden truths and unlocking psychic potential. The product hasn't evolved in 130 years. The marketing language has just been updated to sound more New Age than Victorian. Digital applications have industrialized this manipulation. Apps with names like Mirror of Fate, Reflection Reader, or Future Vision charge $4.99, $12.99 for smartphone versions of the mirror ceremony. Users take selfies, and the app uses AI filters to generate aged versions, darkened versions, or morphed versions of their faces, claiming these reveal future selves or hidden truths. One app called Mirror Prophecy generated $3.8 million in 2022 revenue by convincing users that algorithmic face manipulation was supernatural prediction. Same superstition, same exploitation, just delivered through iOS instead of candlelight. The fruit spiral has found new life on TikTok, where apple peel divination challenge videos have collectively exceeded 800 million views. Teenagers film themselves peeling apples, throwing the spirals, then dramatically reacting to whatever letter shape they think they see. The platform's recommendation algorithm prioritizes videos with strong emotional reactions, which incentivizes performers to have exaggerated responses to random peel shapes. This creates a feedback loop where young people are essentially training themselves to take this Victorian superstition seriously for the sake of social media engagement. Dating platforms have monetized spiral prophecy psychology through compatibility prediction premium features. Apps like Match, eHarmony, and Bumble offer upgraded tiers costing $12.25 monthly that include relationship forecasting or soulmate timeline predictions. These features use basic algorithms analyzing user data to generate vague predictions like, you will meet someone significant in the next 3 to 6 months, or your ideal match shares these 3 traits. It's the digital equivalent of fruit peel fortune telling, non-specific predictions that feel personal, timed delivery that creates anticipation, and just enough accuracy through statistical probability to seem valid. The most predatory aspect is the subscription model. Victorian girls perform the mirror ritual once annually. Modern apps send daily notifications encouraging repeated readings and predictions, creating addiction to divination that generates recurring revenue. Internal marketing documents from several major apps explicitly describe these features as engagement hooks and retention drivers. They're not selling predictions. They're selling habitual dependence on predictions, which is infinitely more profitable. Users check their romantic predictions multiple times daily, make dating decisions based on algorithmic fortune-telling, and pay monthly fees for the psychological equivalent of throwing apple peels and interpreting random landing patterns. These companies understand exactly what they're doing. They've studied Victorian superstitions, identified the psychological vulnerabilities those superstitions exploited, and rebuilt those exact manipulation mechanisms using modern technology and behavioral science. The mirror and fruit spiral didn't disappear. They just got venture capital funding and user interface design. Kentucky, October 31st, 1904. The Morrison family sets their dining table for 8 people, even though only 7 are alive. The 8th chair belongs to their father, dead since April. They've prepared his favorite dishes: roasted chicken, buttered potatoes, apple pie. But here's the rule that made this tradition terrifying. From the moment they sit down until the meal ends, nobody can make any sound. Not a word, not a cough, not even a sharp breath. The superstition is absolute. Whoever breaks the silence will be dead before the next Halloween. Their youngest daughter, Emma, age 12, reaches for bread and knocks over a water glass. It shatters. She screams. The family journal records what happened next. Emma became convinced she was already dead, stopped eating, and wasted away over 11 months. The doctor's report listed failure to thrive, but the family knew better. She'd been claimed by breaking the silence. This wasn't unique to the Morrisons or Kentucky. Variations of the silent feast or mute supper appeared across Ireland, Scotland, Wales, throughout Appalachian communities, anywhere Celtic traditions had traveled. The core belief remained consistent. Halloween dissolved the barrier between living and dead, allowing deceased family members to return home for one night. If you honored them with their favorite meal and maintained perfect silence, they'd visit peacefully and perhaps bring blessings. But speak, and you'd insulted them so gravely they'd drag you back to death's realm as punishment. Different regions added their own terrifying variations. Some traditions demanded the meal be cooked in silence, making even meal preparation a minefield where dropping a pot meant doom. Others required everything to be served in reverse order, dessert before dinner, to confuse spirits into staying longer. The most extreme versions prohibited facing the deceased's chair directly. You had to sit with your back to the empty seat, forbidden from turning around even if you felt breathing on your neck or heard footsteps behind you. Historical accounts describe children having accidents at the table because asking permission to leave was impossible, and leaving your seat meant the spirit could steal your place and your life along with it. The psychological warfare this inflicted on families was extraordinary. Try maintaining absolute silence during an entire meal with multiple people, especially children. It's nearly impossible. This meant someone almost always made some noise, which meant someone always believed they'd been marked for death. The superstition guaranteed its own confirmation through impossible standards. Even worse, eating under extreme stress amplifies every bodily function. Your stomach growls louder. Your breathing sounds like roaring. Your heartbeat throbs in your ears. This heightened physiological awareness creates perfect conditions for panic attacks and auditory hallucinations, which believers interpreted as the dead arriving to collect their debt. The social enforcement mechanisms reveal the true cruelty. If your family refused to perform the silent supper, neighbors would accuse you of disrespecting your dead, and you'd face community ostracism. But if you participated and someone broke silence, that person became seen as cursed and dangerous to be near, also resulting in social exclusion. The superstition created a no-win scenario. Participate and risk being cursed, or refuse and guarantee social death. This is textbook cult control psychology. Create high-stakes rituals with impossible demands, then ensure punishment for both participation failures and non-participation. Historical documentation reveals mass hysteria incidents that this superstition triggered. In 1891, a Welsh community organized a collective silent supper in their town hall for all residents who'd lost family members that year. Over 250 people participated. 30 minutes into the meal, a child sneezed violently. Before anyone could process what happened, his mother shrieked, certain her son was doomed. Her scream caused others to panic. Someone dropped a plate. The crash triggered cascading terror. Within minutes, dozens were screaming, praying, fleeing the hall, convinced they'd all been cursed because the silence had shattered. Here's what makes this revealing. In the 12 months following that failed silent supper, 8 of the 250 participants died. Seems like proof the curse worked, right? Except consider the context. Wales, 1891. Average life expectancy barely reached 50. Tuberculosis, influenza, cholera, workplace accidents, these killed regularly. In any random group of 250 people in that era and location, 8 to 12 deaths annually was statistically expected, even slightly below average. But because these 8 had attended the cursed supper, their deaths were attributed to supernatural punishment rather than ordinary mortality. The 242 survivors were forgotten. The 8 dead became legend, reinforcing the superstition for another generation. Religious authorities often organized these silent suppers, which reveals the control mechanism. The message was clear. Your deceased loved ones are watching, judging, capable of destroying you if proper rituals aren't followed. This kept grieving families psychologically dependent on religious intermediaries who claimed expertise in safely honoring the dead. It's identical to how mediums and spiritualists operate. Create anxiety about the dead's judgment, position yourself as the necessary guide, profit from desperate people's grief and fear. Something particularly insidious about silent supper traditions. Many required families to cook dishes the deceased had introduced to the family, often through marriage or cultural heritage. This had an erasure effect, reducing complex human beings to mere food preferences and empty chairs. The actual person, their personality, memories, love, all disappeared into abstract spirit presence that could harm you. This dehumanization made projection easier. Instead of mourning actual people, families feared generalized supernatural threats, which is psychologically simpler but emotionally devastating in different ways. Fast forward to today, and paranormal dining experiences have become a booming industry, generating over 150 million annually in North America alone. Companies with names like Dinner with the Departed, The Ghost Feast, and Seance Supper Club charge $175, $350 per person for events that literally recreate Victorian silent supper traditions with theatrical production value and modern liability protection. The business model is ingeniously simple. Take a superstition people once performed for free in their homes. Add location ambiance by renting supposedly haunted mansions or historic buildings. Hire actors to play spirit mediums and paranormal experts. Guide paying customers through multi-course meals that include periods of required silence where they are encouraged to open themselves to spiritual contact. Remove the actual danger while maintaining psychological thrills. The threat is gone, but the fear response remains, letting customers feel like they're engaging authentic supernatural experiences. These companies use sophisticated manipulation tactics. Experiences typically begin with dramatic histories of the location, tragic deaths, documented hauntings, unexplained phenomena. This primes participants' brains for expectation bias, a psychological phenomenon where expecting something makes you more likely to perceive it happening. Then they introduce the silence rule. creating tension and hypervigilance. During silent periods, hidden speakers play subtle audio. Whispers barely at audibility threshold, creaks, footsteps, breathing sounds. These are engineered to be just noticeable enough to register, but ambiguous enough to question whether you really heard them. Social media amplification has made these experiences explosively popular. Participants pay $200+ for the meal, then provide free marketing by posting Instagram photos and TikTok videos claiming they definitely felt a presence or heard unexplained voices. This user-generated testimony creates social proof that drives new bookings, building a self-perpetuating cycle where the experience's legitimacy gets constantly reinforced by participant claims, even though everything is carefully orchestrated theatrical manipulation. But here's where it becomes truly predatory. Premium, personalized spirit contact packages, costing an additional $150 or $600. Customers provide information about deceased loved ones before the event. During the meal, the spirits deliver messages containing specific details only the deceased supposedly knew. The mechanism is straightforward cold reading. Companies research participants' social media, mine obituaries, analyze booking questionnaire responses. They're using standard mentalist techniques that psychics have employed for centuries, just charging premium prices and framing it as paranormal dinner theater. Apps have digitized this too. Ghost Dinner Challenge and Spirit Feast Detector apps encourage users to film themselves eating in silence while the app supposedly monitors paranormal activity through phone sensors. These apps cost $7.99, $12.99 and have millions of downloads. The detection is randomized graphics triggered by normal accelerometer data and ambient noise. But users become convinced they're communicating with spirits because the app uses authoritative language like entity manifestation detected or spiritual energy surge confirmed. The targeting is what makes this especially unethical. These experiences and apps market heavily in October, when grief and mortality awareness peak seasonally. Advertising specifically targets people who've recently experienced losses, using demographic data and keyword targeting that would be considered predatory in most other industries. But framed as Halloween entertainment, rather than grief exploitation, it escapes ethical scrutiny. Companies generate millions by taking a superstition that inflicted genuine psychological trauma, repackaging it as themed fun, and selling it to the exact vulnerable populations who'd have been harmed by the original. Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, 1892. The town council passes an emergency law. Walking backward on public streets after sunset on October 31st is now illegal, punishable by a $50 fine, equivalent to nearly $1,600 today. Why criminalize reverse walking? Because over the previous decade, 12 town residents had vanished on Halloween night after being seen walking backward toward the cemetery. No bodies recovered. No explanations found. Official records blamed mine shaft accidents and animal attacks. But the entire town believed something else. Spirits had stolen their souls through their exposed spines. This superstition had terrifying consistency across continents. The logic was simple but chilling. Spirits roam freely on Halloween, following living people, searching for entry points into bodies. Walking forward keeps you safe because spirits can only enter through your back, and they can't overtake you from behind if you're facing away from where they lurk. But walk backward, and you literally present your vulnerable spine directly to whatever's trailing you. The moment you reverse direction, spirits can slide into your back, push your soul out through your mouth, and possess your body, while your consciousness gets trapped in their realm. The ritual version added extra horror. Unmarried women were supposed to walk backward around churches or graveyards at midnight on Halloween while holding mirrors, supposedly to glimpse their future husbands in the reflection. This created psychological warfare. Young women were simultaneously warned that backward walking invited demonic possession, while being told it was the only way to learn their romantic fate. Choose curiosity about marriage and risk losing your soul. Choose safety and remain in agonizing uncertainty about your future. Either way, fear controlled the decision. Deaths associated with this superstition are tragically well documented. Medical and police records describe women falling into wells, rivers, and ravines while performing the backward church walk in darkness. Others were struck by horses and carriages because they couldn't see approaching dangers. A particularly horrific 1845 case from Edinburgh describes a 19-year-old who walked backward off a harbor wall during the mirror ritual. Her body was found clutching a shattered mirror. The community didn't blame the inherently dangerous superstition. They claimed she'd witnessed something so unbearable in the glass that she chose the water. Her death became evidence the ritual worked, that she'd seen her future and found it so terrible she preferred drowning, not evidence that walking backward near cliffs in darkness with a mirror is objectively dangerous. The neuroscience explaining why backward walking creates intense psychological effects is both fascinating and disturbing. When you move in reverse, your brain experiences multiple simultaneous disruptions. Your vestibular system, which manages balance and spatial awareness, receives conflicting information. Your eyes report the world moving one direction, while your body travels the opposite. This conflict triggers disorientation and mild vertigo, which your brain interprets as environmental danger. In a mind primed for supernatural threats, this disorientation becomes interpreted as spiritual presence rather than normal neurological response to conflicting sensory input. Backward movement also activates threat detection systems in overdrive. Your visual field faces away from your travel direction, meaning dangers could approach from behind, completely outside your awareness. Psychologists call this directional vulnerability anxiety, a stress state where threats could materialize at any moment from areas you can't monitor. Combined with darkness and expectation of supernatural encounters, this vulnerability creates perfect conditions for panic attacks, which medieval people interpreted as spiritual attacks rather than neurological stress responses triggered by sensory deprivation and disorientation. There's also proprioceptive interference, where reverse movement disrupts your body's internal sense of position and motion. This disruption can generate brief hallucinations, typically peripheral vision phenomena, where you perceive movement or shapes that aren't actually present. When medieval people reported seeing shadows following them or feeling presences while walking backward, they weren't necessarily fabricating experiences. They were experiencing genuine neurological phenomena caused by backward motion, but interpreting these through supernatural frameworks because that's what cultural conditioning taught them. Historical records describe trance-like states during backward walking rituals. An 1831 letter from a Dublin woman describes her church walk. "I moved as through thick honey, and sounds reached me as though from underwater. When I turned, I saw Thomas plain as day, though I knew him to be miles distant at sea." What she's describing is almost certainly a dissociative episode caused by sensory deprivation, hyperventilation from stress, and disorientation from prolonged backward motion, all predictable neurological responses. But to her, this was supernatural vision, confirmation the ritual delivered genuine prophetic revelation. Modern businesses exploit this superstition everywhere once you recognize the pattern. Commercial haunted attractions specifically engineer reverse motion rooms, where visitors must walk backward through dark corridors, while actors create sounds and physical touches from behind. This isn't accidental design. It's calculated exploitation of the neurological vulnerabilities we just discussed. Forcing backward movement in darkness with the expectation of threats triggers the exact threat detection overload that made medieval people believe in soul theft through reverse walking. The business mechanics are sophisticated. These attractions charge $35 to $75 per person and process thousands nightly throughout October. Backward walking sections serve multiple revenue-optimizing functions. They slow visitor flow, extending time each group needs to complete the attraction, which limits hourly capacity and justifies premium pricing through artificial scarcity. They generate viral social media content because terror responses during backward sections are genuine and dramatic, providing free marketing through user-generated posts. And they require minimal investment, just dark hallways and actors, making them extremely high margin per square foot of attraction space. Virtual reality has weaponized this concept entirely. VR horror titles like Souls Reversed and The Backward Path feature gameplay mechanics where characters can only move by walking backward while threats approach from the direction you're facing. This creates sustained neurological stress persisting hours after gameplay ends. Users report recurring nightmares, persistent anxiety, paranoid feelings of being followed, symptoms essentially identical to what medieval people described after performing backward walking rituals. VR companies market this as evidence of immersive and realistic horror, but they're really just triggering ancient neurological vulnerabilities, now monetized at $34.99 per download. Social media platforms have spawned backward walking challenges generating billions of cumulative views. The Reverse Cemetery Walk Challenge has teenagers filming themselves walking backward around graveyards at midnight on Halloween, attempting to provoke supernatural encounters. Multiple documented injuries have resulted from people walking into obstacles, falling down stairs, or getting struck by vehicles, plus several trespassing arrests. But each injury or arrest generates more engagement, more views, more imitators. Platform algorithms don't care about promoting dangerous behavior based on centuries-old superstitions. They only optimize for engagement metrics, and backward walking challenges deliver massive engagement. What's particularly insidious? Fitness and wellness apps have gamified backward walking while hiding the superstitious origins. Apps called Reverse Motion Training and Backward Walk Fitness promote reverse walking as exercise, which has legitimate physiological benefits, but they spike in downloads during October and explicitly use Halloween-themed marketing. They are exploiting renewed interest in backward walking, created by seasonal superstition resurgence while pretending to be credible fitness tools. Some include features to track your nighttime backward walking sessions, which is just encouraging dangerous behavior with a thin wellness veneer. The most cynical exploitation comes from paranormal tour companies charging $50 or $120 per person for guided experiences featuring backward walking segments to enhance paranormal receptivity. These tours blend historical superstition with pseudoscientific language about energy fields and spiritual openness. They teach paying customers that backward walking makes them vulnerable to supernatural forces, then guide them backward through supposedly haunted locations while creating unexplained phenomena through hidden speakers and actor plants. It's the same superstition that caused actual disappearances and deaths in the 1800s, now repackaged as premium entertainment, where danger is manufactured and terror is simultaneously real and completely artificial. The tragedy is that tour companies have had participants injured by walking backward into walls, other people, or obstacles in darkness. But instead of acknowledging the activity's inherent danger, they frame injuries as spiritual resistance or paranormal attacks. This actually reinforces belief in the superstition while generating word-of-mouth marketing. They're creating new believers in soul theft through backward walking, while legally protecting themselves via liability waivers participants sign before experiences begin. It's profitable fear built on historical trauma, generating millions annually by convincing people their neurological responses to disorientation are evidence of supernatural vulnerability to soul theft. Salem, Massachusetts, Halloween night 1876. 3 teenage girls die within 6 hours of each other. Official causes: 1 fell downstairs and broke her neck, 1 choked on food, 1 died from what the coroner vaguely termed systemic poisoning. But Salem knew the real story. All 3 had been attempting the silent cake ceremony, a superstition so deadly it had been quietly killing young women for generations. The ritual's requirements were specific and brutal. Mix flour, water, salt, and drops of your own blood in complete silence. Bake the cake without making any sound. Walk backward up a staircase while carrying the cake and a mirror. At exactly midnight, eat the cake while staring at your reflection. If you succeeded perfectly, you'd see your future husband's face. If you failed, if any sound escaped your lips, you'd see your own death staring back. The term dumb cake didn't mean stupid. Dumb was archaic language for mute or speechless, but the name proved grimly prophetic. The ritual required girls to prick their fingers for blood, mix ingredients, bake, transport, and consume the cake without producing a single sound. No prayers while mixing, no humming while baking, no gasp when you saw whatever appeared in the mirror. The difficulty wasn't accidental. The ritual was engineered to be nearly impossible, guaranteeing most attempts ended in failure, which meant most participants believed they just sealed their own death sentences. Diaries and letters from the era reveal the psychological devastation. An 1861 letter from a Yorkshire girl reads, "I maintained silence through mixing and baking, but as I raised the final bite to my lips while gazing into the glass, I saw such horror that I cried out, 'The spell is broken. I have seen my end.'" She died 9 months later from tuberculosis, but her family and social circle attributed the death to her failed ritual rather than disease. Her death became cautionary folklore that reinforced the superstition for other girls, ensuring more would attempt it and more would believe themselves doomed when they inevitably made noise during an impossible task. The gendered targeting reveals the superstition's true function, controlling young women through manufactured anxiety linking their worth to marriage, while threatening death for imperfect performance. Notice only unmarried girls performed dumb cake ceremonies, typically teenagers. The ritual explicitly connected a woman's value to finding a husband while simultaneously threatening her life if she failed to maintain impossible silence. This created psychological torture. Your significance depends on marriage, but trying to divine your marital future could kill you. Either way, your mental energy was consumed by marriage and death rather than education, independence, or self-determination. This wasn't accidental social evolution. It was deliberate social engineering through supernatural terror. The ingredients required for these cakes varied regionally, but many versions included genuinely lethal components. Some recipes called for graveyard dirt, which could harbor pathogens from decomposing remains. Others required plants like belladonna, hemlock, or digitalis, all severely toxic to humans. The belief was that dangerous ingredients amplified the ritual's power, that you had to genuinely risk death to see your future. This meant teenage girls were literally poisoning themselves while attempting to predict their marriages. That 1876 Salem death attributed to systemic poisoning, almost certainly from toxic ingredients in her ceremonial cake. What makes this particularly cruel? Older women, mothers, and grandmothers often encouraged young girls to perform these rituals while providing traditional recipes containing poisonous ingredients. This wasn't malicious intent. They genuinely believed in the superstition because they'd survived their own attempts, which made them think it was both effective and safe. Survivor bias created intergenerational trauma, where each generation passed down deadly practices wrapped in tradition and love. When girls died from the ritual, blame didn't fall on toxic ingredients or impossible silence requirements. It fell on the girls themselves for breaking the rules or for what they witnessed in the mirror. Choking deaths were tragically predictable consequences of the ritual's design. Try eating a dry, crumbly cake in absolute silence while terrified and staring into a mirror by candlelight. Anxiety makes you breathe rapid and shallow. Fear dries your throat. Your hands shake holding both cake and mirror. When you try swallowing without making natural swallowing sounds, you create extremely high choking risk. Add the backward stair climbing that's already left you disoriented and unbalanced, and you've engineered a perfect storm of dangers that has nothing to do with spirits and everything to do with human physiology under extreme stress. The falling deaths, like that 1876 Salem girl who broke her neck on stairs, were also inevitable outcomes. Walking backward upstairs in darkness while holding a mirror and plate with cake, all while maintaining absolute silence, is extraordinarily dangerous. Depth perception is compromised. Both hands are occupied, preventing you from catching yourself if you stumble. You're breathing shallowly from stress, potentially causing lightheadedness, and you're hyper-aware that any sound means failure and death, creating performance anxiety that virtually guarantees mistakes. The superstition essentially designed a death trap and convinced teenage girls that successfully navigating it would reveal their romantic destiny. The psychological mechanism making dumb cakes devastatingly effective at behavioral control is what modern psychologists call ironic process theory, or thought suppression paradox. When you desperately try not to think about something, or not do something, you become hyper-aware of it, making it more likely to occur. Command yourself, don't make any sound, and you become intensely conscious of every breath, every swallow, every tiny noise your body produces. This heightened awareness increases anxiety, which increases mistake likelihood, which fulfills the superstition's prophecy. The ritual was psychologically engineered to make failure nearly certain, keeping fear alive and the social control mechanism operational. Contemporary psychology also recognizes this as ritualized abuse, where impossible standards are established with severe psychological consequences for failure. Victims develop learned helplessness, believing outcomes are entirely their fault even when the situation was rigged against success from the start. When a girl believed she'd cursed herself by making noise during a dumb cake ritual, she wasn't being irrational. She was responding exactly as the psychological conditioning intended. The superstition had transferred all responsibility for her fate onto her own actions, eliminating any possibility of questioning the ritual itself or the society promoting it. Now examine how this exact superstition has been resurrected for contemporary markets. The multi-billion-dollar wedding industry has essentially repackaged dumb cake anxiety into endless bridal superstitions and rituals exploiting identical fears. Your wedding will be ruined. Your marriage will fail. You'll end up alone. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue isn't ancient wisdom. It's Victorian invention designed to make brides purchase specific items and follow specific rules under threat of marital disaster. Wedding planning apps and websites have digitized the dumb cake manipulation. Apps like Bridal Prophecy and Wedding Destiny Reader charge $18, $35 for personalized marriage predictions based on wedding date numerology, dress color symbolism, and other fabricated superstitions. These apps generate millions in annual revenue by convincing anxious brides that their marriage success depends on following arbitrary rules and purchasing recommended products. Same psychological mechanism: create impossible standards, threaten disaster for non-compliance, profit from resulting anxiety. The wedding cake superstition industry is particularly cynical. Cake toppers, cutting ceremonies, feeding rituals all come with superstitious warnings about proper procedures. Cut from the wrong tier? 7 years of marital discord. Use the wrong knife. Financial troubles. Feed your spouse incorrectly. Guaranteed conflicts. These aren't traditions. They're invented rules designed to sell specialized wedding products. Ceremonial knives for $180. Specific cake toppers for $125. Instruction guides for $25. Average American weddings now cost over $35,000. And superstition-driven purchases account for estimated 18 to 25% of that total. Dating apps have transformed the dumb cake concept into subscription revenue streams. Soulmate prediction features charging monthly fees to tell users when and how they'll meet the one are just digitized versions of the mirror-gazing ceremony. They exploit identical desperation to know romantic futures, identical willingness to follow arbitrary rules, identical fear of ending up alone. Bumble's Destiny Insights, Hinge's Future Match Predictor, and Match's Soulmate Timeline have collectively generated over $75 million in additional revenue by convincing users that algorithms can predict romantic destiny, which is functionally identical to believing cake recipes and mirrors could accomplish the same in 1876. The most disturbing contemporary parallel is the engagement manifestation trend on social media. Women share elaborate rituals they perform to manifest their proposals, specific date routines, vision boards, manifestation journals, all requiring precise execution or the engagement won't materialize. This is dumb cake psychology repackaged as self-help empowerment. Influencers promoting these rituals often have affiliate links to the journals, vision boards, and courses they're recommending. Generating income from women's relationship anxiety. When followers report the rituals didn't work, the response is always identical. You didn't follow correctly. You didn't believe strongly enough. You failed. The system can never fail. Only participants can fail. The Halloween resurrection of dumb cake rituals has proven particularly profitable. October-themed baking kits marketed as prophecy cakes or fortune desserts have become popular, sold as ancient traditions for revealing romantic futures. These kits, costing $45.95, include pre-measured ingredients, mirrors, candles, and instruction cards describing how to perform the ritual correctly. Some include companion apps that use phone cameras to analyze what you see in the mirror. providing AI-powered romantic predictions. It's complete monetization of a superstition that killed teenage girls, now sold as empowering entertainment for modern women wanting to connect with ancestral wisdom. What makes this especially predatory is the demographic targeting. These products market most heavily to women in their late 20s and 30s, the demographic experiencing maximum social pressure regarding marriage and children. Marketing explicitly plays on fears of being left behind, missing opportunities, or making wrong relationship choices. It's creating artificial anxiety, then selling superstitious solutions, which is exactly what the original dumb cake ritual accomplished, just with better graphic design and influencer marketing partnerships. The manipulation hasn't evolved in 150 years. Only the profit margins have improved and the delivery mechanisms have modernized. Here's what the Halloween industry desperately hopes you never realize. Virtually every ancient tradition you're currently participating in was either completely invented or radically modified by corporations within the last 70 years, specifically to maximize consumer spending. The $12.2 billion Americans poured into Halloween in 2023 didn't organically evolve from Celtic harvest festivals or Victorian parlor games. It emerged from calculated marketing campaigns that identified profitable superstitions, amplified the fear and social pressure surrounding them, then positioned commercial products as necessary solutions. This is contemporary psychological warfare disguised as festive fun, and the battlefield is your bank account. Let's examine how the industry manufactures artificial tradition. In the 1950s, candy manufacturers faced a significant problem. Their peak sales periods concentrated around Christmas and Easter, leaving massive production capacity idle for months. Halloween existed but centered primarily on homemade treats, community gatherings, and minimal commercial participation. The candy industry, working with major advertising agencies, launched coordinated campaigns to transform Halloween into a candy-centric commercial holiday by exploiting existing superstitions and engineering new ones. They promoted fears about homemade treats being poisoned or tampered with, despite virtually zero documented cases of this actually occurring outside of isolated family tragedies unrelated to stranger danger. This fear campaign succeeded spectacularly. By the 1970s, stranger danger panic combined with amplified fears about tampered candy made store-bought factory-sealed candy seem like the only safe option. Candy companies positioned themselves as protectors of children's safety, while simultaneously profiting from fear they'd helped manufacture. This is called solution marketing, where you create or amplify a problem, then sell the solution. The brilliant part was making parents feel that buying pre-packaged candy wasn't consumerism but responsible parenting. The manipulation shifted purchasing from optional indulgence to morally mandatory protection. The costume industry followed an identical strategic playbook. Before the 1990s, most Halloween costumes were homemade or reused across multiple years. The costume industry needed to engineer costume obsolescence, convincing people that last year's costume was socially unacceptable for this year's celebration. They accomplished this by establishing trending characters and themes that changed annually, making previous costumes feel dated and embarrassing. They introduced adult and sexy versions of literally everything to capture the adult market, which previously didn't purchase costumes at all, and they leveraged social media to create visibility and comparison anxiety, making people feel judged if their costumes weren't current, elaborate, or purchased from trendy brands. The decoration industry perfected something called celebratory inflation, where the socially acceptable level of decoration continuously increases every year, creating an endless consumption arms race. In the 1980s, a carved pumpkin and some paper decorations constituted sufficient Halloween participation. By the 2000s, expectations included yard displays with multiple elements. By the 2010s, elaborate animatronics and synchronized light shows became aspirational standards. Now, Instagram-worthy Halloween decorations with near-professional production value are becoming the expected baseline. This isn't organic cultural evolution. It's manufactured dissatisfaction created by constantly showing consumers increasingly elaborate examples until their current participation level feels inadequate and embarrassing. The financial psychology here represents manipulation at its most refined. Halloween decorations are seasonal items with minimal functional value requiring storage for 11 months annually, making them objectively poor financial investments. But the industry has successfully reframed decoration spending as community participation, creative expression, and childhood memory-making, rather than wasteful consumption. By attaching emotional and social value to products with zero practical utility, they've created a market where rational cost-benefit analysis gets completely overridden by fear of social judgment and guilt about disappointing children or appearing to lack community spirit. The limited edition and exclusive product strategies deserve particular attention. Halloween products are deliberately designed to be unavailable year-round, creating artificial scarcity that triggers FOMO and impulse purchasing behaviors. Available for a limited time only ranks among the most powerful psychological triggers in consumer marketing, and the Halloween industry deploys it for literally every product category. Those spirit Halloween stores that suddenly appear in empty retail spaces, they're specifically designed to create urgency. The stores materialize suddenly, remain briefly, then vanish, training consumers to buy immediately before it's gone, rather than making considered, rational purchasing decisions. The haunted attraction industry has grown from virtually nothing in the 1970s to over 600 million annually by literally monetizing fear itself. These attractions have perfected the art of selling experiences that make you uncomfortable, terrified, and potentially traumatized, then convincing you this constitutes entertainment worth premium pricing. The psychological mechanism being exploited here is called benign masochism, the human tendency to enjoy negative experiences in controlled environments because the fear feels authentically real, while the actual danger does not. Haunted houses have calculated how to maximize fear intensity while minimizing genuine danger, creating the most profitable fear-to-safety ratio technologically possible. Now let's examine the data manipulation that keeps this machine operational. The Halloween industry regularly releases statistics about average spending that are deliberately inflated to create spending expectations and normalize excessive consumption. When you hear, Americans spend an average of $120 per person on Halloween, that's not a neutral fact. It's a social engineering tool designed to make you feel that spending less than $120 means you're under-participating and failing social expectations. These statistics get repeated in news coverage without critical analysis, creating a feedback loop where reported spending becomes expected spending, which becomes actual spending, which gets reported as the new baseline spending, and the cycle continues escalating upward indefinitely. The industry also exploits loss aversion, the psychological principle that people fear losing something more intensely than they desire gaining something equivalent. Halloween marketing is overwhelmingly built around potential losses. Your child will be the only one without an elaborate costume. Your house will be the only one without impressive decorations. You'll be the neighbor who gives out disappointing candy. These fear-based messages are psychologically more powerful than positive messages about Halloween's benefits. You're not buying products. You're buying protection from social exclusion, disappointment, and judgment. The product is merely the delivery mechanism for relief from manufactured anxiety. Social media has supercharged every manipulation technique by adding visibility and forced comparison. When everyone posts their elaborate Halloween displays, amazing costumes, and perfect-themed parties, it creates what psychologists call aspirational comparison anxiety. You're no longer competing with your immediate neighbors. You're competing with Instagram's highlight reel showcasing the entire world's best Halloween executions. This is psychologically crushing and financially devastating, driving people to spend money they don't have to meet standards that don't actually exist in their real physical communities, only in curated digital spaces. The influencer economy has added another exploitation layer. Halloween influencers with affiliate marketing deals promote products while claiming they're simply sharing what they love. A lifestyle blogger showcases her $4,000 Halloween yard display, casually mentions where each item was purchased, and includes affiliate links. Her followers perceive this as friendly advice rather than paid advertising. When they purchase through her links, she earns commission, companies make sales, and her followers go into debt attempting to recreate displays that were essentially sponsored content. The manipulation is invisible, which makes it significantly more effective than traditional advertising that consumers recognize and mentally filter. The final piece of the manufactured fear economy is how the industry has colonized formerly free community activities and transformed them into paid commercial experiences. Trick-or-treating used to be free neighborhood walking. Now there are trunk-or-treat events charging admission fees. Costume parades used to be community-organized volunteer efforts. Now they're sponsored events at shopping centers explicitly designed to drive foot traffic and sales. Even spiritual aspects have been commercialized with paid ghost tours, paranormal investigations, and psychic readings exploiting people's genuine beliefs or curiosity about the supernatural. Everything that used to be community-driven and cost-free has been captured and monetized by identifying the emotional or social value, then positioning paid participation as superior to traditional free alternatives. The Halloween industry has successfully transformed a holiday based on ancient harvest festivals and spiritual beliefs into an economic juggernaut, generating more revenue than the entire GDP of some small nations. They accomplish this by systematically identifying human psychological vulnerabilities, exploiting fear of social judgment, manufacturing tradition from thin air, and convincing people that love, community participation, and responsible parenting require ever-increasing consumption. It's a masterclass in mass manipulation that would make Victorian dumb cake promoters envious with jealousy. At least the Celtic druids who collected Samhain tributes had to physically go door to door making their demands. Modern Halloween corporations have convinced you to voluntarily visit their stores, enthusiastically spend your money, perform their marketing on social media for free, and thank them for the privilege of participation. So we've reached the end of this investigation, and the question isn't whether these superstitions hold genuine power. The question is, why do we continue feeding them? You now understand that mirror rituals exploit facial pareidolia and confirmation bias. You've seen how silent suppers weaponized grief and social control mechanisms. You know backward walking triggers neurological vulnerabilities that feel supernatural but aren't. You've learned that dumb cakes killed teenage girls through impossible standards and toxic ingredients. And you've witnessed how a multi-billion-dollar industry has systematically resurrected, repackaged, and monetized every single manipulation for maximum profit. But knowledge doesn't guarantee immunity. Even understanding all of this, most people will still participate in Halloween traditions this year. They'll purchase the costumes, install the decorations, distribute the candy, and follow unwritten social rules about what proper Halloween participation looks like. Why? Because the alternative, complete opt-out, carries a social cost that feels higher than the financial cost of compliance. And that's the genuine genius of how these superstitions evolved and survived. They don't persist because people believe in them. They persist because not participating is psychologically harder than participating. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Every generation believes they're too educated to fall for superstitions, yet every generation discovers new versions to embrace. Victorians thought they'd evolved past medieval witch hunts, then created elaborate mirror rituals and dumb cakes that killed just as effectively through different mechanisms. We think we're too scientifically literate to believe in soul theft through backward walking. But we're spending $600 million annually on haunted attractions exploiting the exact same neurological vulnerabilities. We've simply replaced supernatural explanations with scientific-sounding marketing language, but the underlying manipulation mechanisms remain functionally identical. Energy fields and manifestation are just contemporary vocabulary for magic and curses. The genuinely frightening aspect of Halloween isn't ghosts or demons or ancient spirits. It's how effortlessly billions of people can be convinced to perform rituals they don't understand, follow rules they never agreed to, and spend money solving problems that were manufactured specifically to sell solutions. It's watching rational adults who would laugh at medieval superstitions voluntarily participate in their modern equivalents without recognizing the connection. It's realizing we're not actually that different from Victorians staring into mirrors seeking death omens, or Celts leaving offerings to appease spirits. We've just upgraded the aesthetic and added credit card processing and social media documentation. But there's an alternative approach. You can acknowledge Halloween's dark history, understand the manipulation tactics deployed against you, and still choose to participate on your own terms. Carved pumpkins can be enjoyable creative projects without believing they trap souls. Costumes can be creative expression without needing to follow trends or spend hundreds of dollars. Decorations can be minimal or elaborate based on your actual budget and genuine desire, not social pressure. Candy can be whatever you can afford without guilt that you're failing some imaginary standard. The holiday doesn't control you unless you surrender that control. The real power isn't in rejecting Halloween entirely. It's in recognizing when you're being manipulated and consciously choosing whether to comply. Purchase the costume because you genuinely want it, not because you're afraid of judgment. Skip the decorations without guilt if they don't bring you authentic joy. Distribute whatever candy fits your budget comfortably. Participate in traditions that hold actual meaning for you personally, and ignore manufactured ones that exist solely to generate profit. The spirits don't care. The ancient Celts aren't watching and judging. The only judgment that matters is arbitrary social pressure from people who probably haven't questioned their own participation either. Now it's your turn to process everything we've covered. Which superstition shocked you most deeply? The Victorian girls who died performing dumb cake rituals? The towns that criminalized walking backward? The silent suppers that traumatized entire families for generations? Drop a comment and tell us which revelation hit hardest for you. And here's the critical question. Are you going to change how you approach Halloween now that you understand the truth? Or will you continue feeding the machine, participating in traditions that exist primarily to extract money from your account and control your behavior through manufactured social pressure? There's no wrong answer here. But at least now you're making an informed choice rather than blindly following invisible rules nobody voted on. If this exposed something you never questioned before, smash that subscribe button because we're constantly investigating the dark psychology, hidden history, and business manipulation behind everyday things you've never thought twice about. Your favorite topic might be our next deep dive, so drop it in the comments. What other tradition deserves this same investigative treatment? What other holiday, superstition, or cultural ritual needs to be exposed? And one final thought to leave you contemplating. If Halloween superstitions that originated as genuine survival beliefs in ancient Celtic culture can be transformed into a 12 billion industry manipulating modern consumer behavior, what else in your daily life is accomplishing the same thing? Which of your daily habits, beliefs, and purchasing decisions are based on traditions you never consciously chose, rules nobody democratically voted on, and expectations that serve someone else's profit margin more than your actual well-being or happiness? Maybe it's time to start questioning everything systematically. Or maybe it's psychologically easier to just continue carving pumpkins, buying costumes, and convincing yourself you're doing it because you want to, not because 1,000 years of psychological conditioning, religious manipulation, and corporate marketing have convinced you that you should. The choice is entirely yours. But you can't claim ignorance anymore. You know what's really haunting you every October 31st. It's not spirits or demons or supernatural entities. It's the ghosts of manipulations past, dressed up in modern packaging, coming back year after year to systematically pick your pocket while you smile and call it cherished tradition. Thanks for watching. Sleep well tonight, if you can.